Good morning, everybody. My name is Samantha Mirabal. I'm with Melco's application team doing our DesignShop Talk today. I had some technical difficulties with my internet last week, so yeah, I'm here today. So I had to rerun the entire wire to my house from the pole. Quite obnoxious. Anyway, but it's all up and running and we are good to go. So if you have questions while we're live, please type them in on the comments. We're live on both Facebook and YouTube. Don't send them privately. I don't see those. So type them in on the chat. And if you see me looking off to the side, I've got a secondary monitor over here. That is where I'm looking. So let me make sure both platforms are up. There is Facebook. And I see myself, so I guess it's up. And there is YouTube. Excellent. Okay. All right, so let's see what we have. So we have someone that's got this thingy here, and they're saying, I want to be able to do HTV. So this is like that glitter flake, or you can use any heat transfer vinyl, but don't do like I do, and where I did the first time I did it, and leave the liner on it. That doesn't work well, but you end up with a plastic thing embroidered on, which that's no good. Anyway, so you want to be able to create your own thing like this of your own fonts. So rather than just English fonts, but ones that have different characters and whatnot. So yeah, let's take a look at this. A few things, just looking at your little stitch out. For the HTV, good morning Scott, for the HTV to be able to rip cleanly, you have to be able to have a whole bunch of needle penetrations on it. The easiest way to do that is to do a satin stitch all the way around it. Okay, now if you're going to use a running stitch like that, that's okay too. Just you want to make the stitch length very short, and maybe go over it a few times, but I would kind of avoid that, honestly. I would go with the satin stitch. You'll get more needle penetrations along the way. It'll give you a nice clean rip and you'll be good to go. So let's see how we'd make something. All right, so I went and found myself a word with characters. So I think that says service dog in Hungarian, or assistance dog, excuse me. I think that's what it says. But anyway, that's what we got. So I've got some text, and what we want to do is create that border on it. Good morning, John and MR. Thanks for joining today. So how do we go about doing that? So you type out whatever you want, and whatever font you want. I picked Basic Block because it has the different characters. Use what you want. All right. So up here, then I can go Object, Generate, Basting Primer. I can tell it to be a primer stitch. This offset is going to be how far away from the object do you want your shape to be. So if I make this really small, notice what it does. It puts all these gaps in here, which, while pretty, for your applications, probably not ideal, right? So that wouldn't really work. So if you're going to use this for your application, then you would have to go through and modify and delete those other ones. And if you haven't seen this custom point selection is an easy way to quickly delete things. So I can come through here and circle all the points I want gone. Let's say I want all those. Hit enter to close my shape. It selects them all. I can hit delete. So you can do that and modify it. But why don't we try a different offset? So generate basting primer, go to the primer. I'm going to leave it at the 50 and say okay. All right, so is that too big? Is it too small? That's a personal preference. I'm going to leave it there because we're putting a satin stitch around this, okay? A few things you'll notice, because of the bumps of the font, it has these extra points in here. I'm just going to delete them. It's not that it hurts it, I just don't think they're necessary. So again, I'm going to circle them and hit delete. I don't want that one either. Why am I doing this? Just because. Why not clean it up, right? All right, so now I got a shape. Now that I have a shape, now this is where we do the part of changing it over into your specific application, because we don't really want to sew through our HTV like that, right? I mean, you can, but it's not ideal. So let's convert that over. You can use this thing here, change element from one type to another. All right, so let's say we want to make that a walk. Let's say a bean stitch. I can say replace. Now I've got a bean stitch running around my shape. So I would sew that, sew my font. But then again, I want to be able to rip that HTV away, right? So while this might rip away, it'd be better to have a satin stitch. So again, I'm going to use the change element from one type to another. And I'm going to say single line center. And this time, instead of replacing my bean stitch, I'm going to say add. And let's put that last. And you can make it whatever width you want. I'm really partial to wider satin stitches. I think they're pretty. That's entirely a personal preference. So you do you, right? So what visually appeals to you? Okay. All right. So I've got that, and there, that will sew, right? So I've got I can take my HTV sheet. Make sure you don't have that plastic liner on it. You can buy it already set up for that rip away process. You don't have to. So yeah, you can peel those up, set it down, sew that bean stitch, your lettering, and then your satin stitch, and you are good to go. Let's see. John, you digitized your first design. Awesome. How'd it go? And he went to see, I assume, Mary Beth and Sue. Yeah, they're awesome. So, I'm glad. Hopefully your design went well. All right, so yeah, this is pretty straightforward. Now, I often get asked, well, what about, let's change the font. Let's see. Script. Which script has characters? That one? Whoa, that's all caps. That's not going to work. All right, so let's make it lower. E.g. the I. Let's see if we have a lowercase I in here. I think it's that one. Yeah. I. T-O-K-U. This is what happens when I try to write in another language that I can't spell. T-Y-A. And it's the O with the umlauts on it, or I think that's what they're called. Oh, if you haven't seen this character list, now you have. Because I never remember the codes to make them. Where is it? The O with the double dots. Is that it? I think that is. There. There. Apply. There. All right. So now we're going to do the same thing, just scripty. Hopefully I didn't misspell it, and if I did, I'm sorry to those who actually can read this. All right. So what happens if you don't have the primer stitch? So again, if you have the primer, it's really simple. Apply it to whatever pad you want. 50 to me is a little large for this sort of application, but what's the right answer? Whatever looks pretty to you is the right answer. So let's say 35 maybe, I don't know. I like that better. I'm gonna get rid of that there. But okay, so we can do it this way. We don't need that. That'll just be a pain to cut. Yeah, so I could do it like that and do the same thing we just did. So one more time. Instead of using this, I can do shift click. So shift and clicking on that right there. So shift and click after you select something. It's going to take it from whatever it was, which was a complex fill, and turn it into what I click it on, which is a walk input. Cool. So I can copy that, paste it after the lettering. And again, this time instead of shift, I can hold control. So control, shift adds, control replaces. So I don't want this walk, I want a satin stitch. So I'm going to do control, click, and now I got a satin stitch. Okay. All right. Well, now that we did that, what do I do if I don't have primer? Well, you got a bunch of different options for you. So you can eyeball it. So you can come into your walk normal and literally right click, left click. Hi, Sherry from Colorado. Well, thanks for joining today. Well, let's do it like that. And what am I doing? I'm doing whatever I feel like just to get close to the lettering. I don't want to go down. That's close enough. Maybe we'll curve it around. That's cool. Left click. So you see, I can still do this even though I don't have the primer stitch. It's going to take me more clicks, right? But I can still get it done. Shift Enter to close the shape. That's cool. Kind of like it. Those points I probably would want to make into curves, but I already drew it, so I'm going to stay with it. All right, so again, I've got my walk. I want that first. Let's give it a different color. I can copy, paste that after this guy, and then again, Control, click on the satin stitch, and now I get a satin stitch around. So, you know, it's, I actually kind of like that. That's cool. All right, so it's there's a bunch of ways you can do it, and it's all giving you the same thing. Now, again, if you have an older version, I get to ask this a lot. That's why I keep on redoing it for you guys. So here's another thing I often do. I'll copy and paste this guy. I have two lettering on top of each other. I don't want that. I want to take it and convert one of them to vector, and I'm going to hide this one for the moment. So I've got a bunch of lettering. I want to merge those combine elements right here, so it's one thing. All right, so now it's mostly one thing. So now I can do object offset outline, and again say, let's say a 30-point offset, and again merge it all. So that gives me, again, I'm going to change that color and turn on the lettering, and you'll see what just happened. So with the exception of those holes that I have to get rid of, that gives me a starting point for an outline, and I can use that one directly if I like it. Notice I personally would smooth some of this out, but that's another way you can also attack this problem, right? So now I've got some art that is an exact distance from my element that I can use that as reference to be able to trace, or I can use it directly if I just want to go with it. So if I'm going to go with that, for what we're doing, I don't need any of this middle stuff. So again, I'm going to use that custom point selection, and it's not going to work because of how I just cut it off, but you'll see. So again, I can do custom point, draw a circle around those holes, hit enter to close it, hit delete, yeehaw. Okay. Stop it. There. So now shift click puts a border, shift and click on the walk, gives me a border stitch in the exact shape of that. There's my lettering. I can copy paste, move that down here, convert it over into a satin stitch, poof, and get something I can work with. Okay, so it's, like I said, there's a bunch of ways to attack this, and it all will give you comparable results, right? Some methods are faster than others, but work with the tools you got. It's my opinion anyway. All right, so what other questions do we have? Oh, John, yay. I'm glad you're being more comfortable trying. Digitizing's fun. Is there a list of all the hotkeys? Scott will have to help there. I know in the, I know you can see them all by going tools, where is it? It's accelerator editor, that guy right there. So you can see hotkeys. All right, so if there is one, like that one, alternate and A will scale to the actual size. So if I hit alternate A, that's actual size if I have it calibrated right. Maria in California, thanks for joining. I know for wireframe editing, there's an entire section of the manual. So let's see, I'm gonna pull up the manual. Oh, it's already there, because guess what? I really like that page. So this is a really helpful set of hotkeys, if you will, that are available when you're doing wireframe editing, right? So if you hold control and drag, or shift and click and drag, and things like that. So these 2 pages for wireframe editing are fabulous to print out, learn. It really is a time saver. On the service site, Melco-service, here, hotkeys. Let's see, DesignShop editor hotkeys. So here are some recommendations and ones that you can set up with instructions on how to set it up. So you can create your own. There's in the manual, these 2 pages specific to wireframe editing are helpful. Let's see, John is asking, DesignShop 10 versus DesignShop 11. Were there any new capabilities? Oh yes, there's a ton. Um, yeah, between 10 and 11, there's a whole lot of additional features. I know there was when it first came out, I think Mike, Nate, and Scott all did a video that went over a lot of the features. There's a primer stitch, there's different underlays, there's the flat fill on lettering, there's an entire new vector auto digitizing features, if you will. There's a bunch. So there was a table somewhere, and if I try to find it, I will just poke around for a long time. So let's see. DesignShop 11 versus 10, maybe. Oh, let's see. There was a table. I don't know what this shows us. All right. That's you. That's not what I'm looking for. There was a table that showed different things that were added. I think they reviewed that in the video, so maybe we can find that link for you. All right, what else do we have? Cash. Okay, hopefully that helps. What else can I help you guys with? Because, oh, let's see. Scott just gave this link. Yeah. Oh, there's a whole bunch of new fonts. That's true. There's a lot of new stuff in 11. I adore the primer stitch. And I really like what the auto underlays and those sorts of things, how they were changed. The foam arrows and some of the decorative stitches. But everyone who watches even one of these knows I love decorative stitches. So I think I talk about them every week, nearly. So there's a bunch of new features with that as well in 11. Okay. Well, I don't actually, let's see, did I actually answer that question? Yeah, we did that. Oh, this reminded me. I use circles instead of rectangles. That's another trick you can always use with the curvy text. Let me open it back up. Undo. Did I delete it? Yeah. I forgot about that trick. So if you don't have the offset tool, that's okay. You can use your vector and you can draw, like let's say I draw a straight circle. So I can draw different shapes and move them until they look visually correct, and then I can merge them all. So let's say I did that. I can take those two and then maybe take a rectangle. So again, draw a vector, draw a rectangle, move it around. What am I doing here? It's just a different way of drawing the shape, but getting it more exact, if you will, rather than just eyeballing it. Not that it is exact with what I'm drawing here, but you know, I can then use this measuring tool and get it exact if I were so inclined, right? So I can move this around. Yeah, that's good. So let's say, ignore the fact that I haven't done the rest of it. I can then take these three shapes, select them, and merge them, and then keep on adding. You know, I need to add a circle down here and so forth. Once you have the vector, now you have art to trace. So that's another way you can do it if you don't have the offset tool, because that is level dependent. Shift. So again, I can take that guy, move it there. Anyway, you get the idea. There. Okay. What other questions might y'all have? Nothing for today? Do you get more fonts the higher the level, or just V11 in general? Scott can correct me. I'm pretty sure just V11 gets you all the fonts because they come with the lettering level, which is one of the lower levels. And then as you go up, you get more features, if you will, more things that you can do. You can like when you go from lettering to whatever the next one is, you can then digitize. Well, then from digitizing, you can have vectors. You get more and more things, corners, the primer stitch. The higher the level you go, the more features you have. Decoratives, I think, are level dependent. Things like that. I know when I started, it there are 45 new, so Scott is, 45 new alphabets, all in all levels of DesignShop V11. So yeah, so it comes with all of them. What other questions? I know when I started digitizing, when you start off, it's a learning process, right? You try something, you sew it out, see what works, see what doesn't, and you learn. That's how we all do it. And I know when I was buying software, I decided if it could do it, I wanted it. So that's why I went with the highest level personally, because in school, when I was in college, I'm a mechanical engineer. So there, I would always get frustrated when I was working in whatever program of the day. And they're like, oh, well, you could do that, but now you have to do it this way, which is the hard way because the school didn't provide the more expensive software. It would make me crazy. So I've gone with the habit. I will eventually use it, so just give me all the features. Anyway, that's just my philosophy on it. But, we work with what we got, what budgets we have, those sorts of things. It's all relevant, right? Okay. So scaling designs. So there's a question, can you go explain the limitations of scaling? So let's go open an expanded file because that's where you'll see the biggest impact of this sort of thing. All right. So making things bigger or smaller, right? When you digitize it yourself, that's cool. As long as it's within DesignShop, you can scale it because it's wireframe based, it's math. So as the element scales, it's going to recalculate where all the stitches have to go. All right. So if this bird was drawn out as a wireframe like this, when I scaled the whole thing up, all right, so look at the bird. Right now it's 753 stitches. So if I take this thing and I make it monstrous, it still looks fine, but now it's 5,000 stitches. Okay. That's okay because this is wireframe. It's a vector type with properties assigned that control how close the stitches are. Now, when you're digitizing, it's always important, if you're starting from scratch, to scale your art to the size that you want. You're going to make different design decisions if you're doing it as a left chest versus a back, right? If you're trying to digitize something that's 3 inches wide and now you want to scale it to 12, well, now, those details you did as a running stitch, because it was so small you had to, they would have fit just fine using a satin stitch and even look better on a back because it's so much larger, right? So you can't just take a design, digitize it at one size, and then jam it down small or large. While the software will allow that, it doesn't always mean the right design decisions were made when you scale it up or down, right? Same way if I digitize it monstrous. So I got it's beautiful. I got all these satin stitches everywhere. And then I try to make it 3 inches. Now all those satin stitches are microscopic and they won't sew. Okay, so you're going to have to either edit it or change it or do something to make it work. All right, so now that's that's when you're working with wireframe based, native to DesignShop. When you come over to the other side, and now you're working with expanded format things, all right, you'll hear rules of thumbs. Don't make it scale it larger or smaller by more. I hear all kinds of numbers. I personally don't like doing any more than about 15 to 20%. That's kind of anything over that, I start wanting to run away and just redigitize it myself. But, 10%, 10, 15, I think you can go as high as 30, but the more you go away from however it was done. So if it was digitized at 3 inches and now you're going to scale it up, the more you're going to introduce errors into it. So you can scale it up by percent easily by clicking on this W or the H. And let's say I did 115%. So it's 15% larger and it recalculates everything. It has a few more stitches. It's pretty okay. But if I keep doing that, eventually I'm going to get gaps in the stitching because you're stretching everything out, right? So the software compensates for that somewhat, but eventually you're going to lose consistency of it because just because. Same thing, if you take a big design and you try to compress it down really small, more than that 10 to 20%, all the stitches get closer and closer together. Eventually you've created a bulletproof design that won't sew, right? So overall, I would say 10 to 20% scaling. So if you buy designs online, a lot of times they'll sell multiple sizes. Buy the one closest to the size you need because you want to scale none or as little as possible to make it fit. Okay, so the smallest amount of scaling you can handle is what you want to do. But yeah, just don't scale a ton. All right, what else do we have? Understanding underlay and compensation. So underlay is, again, another thing that it's critically important, in my opinion. It's really important for having a quality product in the end, right? So what is underlay physically doing? It's tying your stabilizer and your fabric together and putting a layer of stitching on it so that when it goes to sew the top stitching, it actually stays on top of the fabric. It doesn't sift in. Your fabric isn't flowing all over the place. It's holding it still, right? So part of holding it still is going to be hooping. You got to hoop well. You got to choose appropriate stabilizers. But then you want to make sure you have appropriate underlay so that things are as stable as they can be for that top stitching to go in. Because if everything's moving around, so if the fabric moves over here, but your design's now sewing, that's where you get your registration issues, right? It doesn't look good if things move around because then the underlay is hanging out, your top stitching's not covering it, you have gaps between elements, those sorts of things, which none of us like, right? So choosing appropriate stabilizers, hooping well, that's of course important. That's, learn how to do it. That's the skill selection sort of thing. But then taking that and turning it where not only did you hoop well, you have the right materials, but now if I paint my wall, right? So I'm going to paint this. I want to prime it first before I put paint on, otherwise it all sinks in. So that's part of what your underlay is doing. It's putting some stitching on top. One, it's holding it all still, but it's also putting thread on top so that when your top stitching goes across, it doesn't fall in, right? So it's the name of the game, again, according to me, is hold it still. So get everything stable so that when your sewing goes in, it gives you that quality product and it looks like the screen, right? So now that's the underlay. So you hoop well, you choose appropriate materials, you put a nice foundation of stitching down to make sure it stays still for your top stitching when it goes in. All right. Now, when that top stitching's going in or when any stitching's going in, you get an effect of it shrinks, right? So to me, it makes sense. If I'm going to make a stitch here and then, so my machine goes and puts a needle penetration, goes through the fabric, grabs the bobbin, comes back out. Now it's going to come over here and it's going to put another needle penetration. Pretend this is a satin stitch. Okay. All right. So what just happened to the hole that was made that the thread's pulling through? As my machine's moving this way, the thread is pulling physically on that hole and it's going this way because that's the direction my machine's moving. So that hole is trying to move over. Now I'm going to go stab the fabric here with my needle, grab the bobbin thread. Now I'm going to come back over here. So what's this hole going to do? It's, as that thread's yanking, pulling through, it's going to drag that direction, right? It's going to come this way. So as I'm sewing back and forth, your net effect is, I deleted my mess. There we go. I'm just going to make a satin stitch and go zoom on it. So the net effect is all these stitches are going to want to move this way. All these stitches are going to want to move that way. So it's narrowing. All right. So as it narrows, that's just what's going to happen. So you prevent that by having good stabilizing, good underlay, but it's going to still shrink a little bit. So what do we do with that? That's what pull compensation's for, right? So that's where you're going to say, hey, I know I'm going to shrink a little bit, but let's compensate for that fact by telling it to overstitch so that when it narrows up, it's where you want it to be. Okay. So again, I like pull offset personally. This is ridiculous. Don't use 7. I'm just showing it to you so you can see the effect. My wireframe says my stitching should be here, but I told it to overstitch by 7 points. So it's going to be 7 points wider. Now, should you use 7? No, you should use 1 to 2. All right. If you're going higher than 3, just do something else. Make the element wider, right? So 1, 2. I'll put, personally, I put 1 to 2 points of offset on everything. The pull by percent is multiplication based. The other one is additive. So good way for me to show you the difference. I got a triangle here. So if I change this to 150%, does that look like a triangle anymore? No. So that's because it's multiplication based. It's looking at the distance from one side of the element to the other, and it's saying overstitch it. So compensate for that by 50% in the direction of sewing. So down up near the end, that distance from side to side is really short. By the time I get down here, it's huge. So I have a whole lot more compensation for it. So by doing percentage wise, you can add some distortions into what you're working on. So I personally never use percentage. I always just use offset. So if I tell it to do something silly, like 10 points of offset, yes, it's still mostly a triangle. So I didn't add that distortion, right? Okay, Natalie, hopefully that answered for you. Can you explain, we got another question typed in. Can you explain how to get fonts from DE font and be able to use them? I don't know what DE font is to be able to help you. So Sherry, if you can help me there, I don't know what that is. Sorry. Let's see. John says, I feel like I overstabilize. Oh, the font. Okay. I feel like I overstabilize because I never know how much is good. Yeah, well, I'm the wrong person to talk to about that because I'll add more stabilizer every day because what I can't stand is I would rather the garment be falling apart than literally they've worn the shirt or the garment out, but the embroidery still looks great. That's my personal preference. So I'll put 2 layers of 3.1 ounce stabilizer on pretty much everything I do, just because I love it. And I don't want them to, I want it to last through time. Yeah. Okay, so DeFont. Okay, I'm trying to think of how to not step on toes. I'm going to show Google Fonts instead, because a lot of the DeFont ones, so Google Fonts are commercially allowed to be used by anyone. So I'm just going to pick those rather than DeFont because the DeFont ones are often for personal use only. So the same thing applies. But let's see. What's a font? Anyone got a name of a font they like? Pretty? Let's see if there's a... No, Pretty doesn't come up with anything. Trending, most popular. What's most popular? I don't like any of these. They're not pretty. Okay, let's do that one. Can it? That's a horrible name for a font. All right, so what you're going to do for any of the fonts that you want to go download, so wherever you want to find them from, that's all on you. But here, I can come over here, download it, however you're going to download it, and when you open that up, you'll see it. You'll get OTF or TTF. Now, if you're working with DesignShop 10, it's got to be a TTF. If you're working in 11 or other, it can be OTFs. But let's go with the extra bold Can It font. What a horrible name. All right, so download your font, install it, then close DesignShop. You have to close DesignShop. I don't want to save any of this. Go away. All right, then reopen DesignShop. Why do you have to close it? Because it's going to reload all the computer fonts. So here now I can go to Can It. There's the Can It font and say, Hello, font, whatever. So there's the Canet font. And I can, do whatever I want with it. Apply whatever properties you want. I set up a style so I can just apply it once and be done with it. Yeah. So, yeah, that's all there is to using your TrueType fonts or your OTF fonts. You go and install it, and they'll all show up under these computer fonts, right? Barcodes, anyway. There's a bunch of them. If I want to use Comic Sans, although these are all fonts that are included in DesignShop normal. Oh, that one's okay. Yeah. So yeah, all you got to do is install it to your computer, close DesignShop, reopen it, and poof, there it is. But fonts are all licensed, which is why I pulled up Google Fonts, because those are commercial license available for all of them. All right. Any other questions? Scroll through all the comments, see if I missed anything. I'm just reading comments, sorry. Went over that, talked about that. Okay, I think I covered everything. Cool. All right, any other questions, y'all? All right. I will be back next week, see what we can work on. If you have questions, you can always, type them in on any of these and on the little pictures, and I'll get notification for them. And make little examples ahead of time if needed, like this one. So whatever you want to learn about, let us know. We'll try to work that in. So you guys have a fantastic week. Trying to think. I got another regatta this weekend, so that's fun. I'm all about pouting. I can't row right now because I have lovely tendonitis, which is making me crazy. So, but my daughter still rows, and I'm going to go coach and do all that fun stuff. So, live vicariously, I guess. All right, you guys, have a fantastic weekend. I will talk to you guys next week, and have fun sewing. Bye, everyone.